Welcome, everyone. This is Tips and Tools, and I'm Dr. Carlos, behavioral psychologist.
And I'm Dr. G, clinical psychologist.
So, what we're going to be talking about today is something interesting. We'll talk a little bit about people getting labeled.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about, do people deny that their significant others or family members have a drug addiction problem or addiction problem, period. Actually, I don't want to label it just drug addiction, but
Yeah, sure.
or even themselves.
Yeah.
So let's get started.
Okay.
First thing, I know a lot of people, I think we've covered this a little bit on some of the previous shows. You have to go back and catch those. But some of the people will deny that they have an addiction problem.
Yes.
But is it a true denial? And what I mean by that is, do people sometimes rationalize it away by saying, no, just because I gamble 3 hours a day, it's not as bad as Johnny who gambles 6 hours a day, so I'm not really addicted.
Yeah.
So they kind of rationalize it and try to compare it to other people to make themselves feel better and to deny that they actually have an addiction problem?
So you're saying that wouldn't be a true denial, it's more of a rationalization?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. And I would call it a bargaining, actually, rather than even denial. So part of the reason is that it helps a person feel better about what they're doing in comparison to somebody else who is more extreme, and therefore get some support, if you will, either internally or again in terms of social comparison, a supportive feeling to feel like things are still okay. And that's why I call it bargaining. They're kind of bargaining with themselves and the common sense that's out there. You know, if I can argue well that I'm not really that bad, as extreme as the next guy, I have bargained my way back into a social acceptance, and kind of being let in again into the in-group and belong to the more of a normal society, if you will, rather than being an outlier.
Because I've seen businessmen who maybe have a cocaine addiction,
Yeah.
for instance, and they say, look, I can still function.
Yeah.
I can still do my job. I'm making good money. I provide for my family. I take care of them. I don't have an addiction problem. But they can't let go of cocaine. But then when you ask them, their retort is kind of a political-like.
Yeah.
Because they say, I don't want to let it go.
Yes.
It isn't that I can't.
Yeah.
I just don't want to. What is that all about? What's going on there?
That's more of a denial. You see,
That's a denial?
This is more of a finesse of this field of addiction, how to detect these things, because
it's tricky.
Because as you mentioned, you see, in what you mentioned, there was no social comparison. It's more of a, I have functioned so far so well. I'm running a business. I'm successful. So that's almost like this self-perpetuating, self-reinforcing evidence. I am successful, I make a lot of money, or I take care of a lot of people, I'm employing many people, I'm overseeing a group of individuals, I run an organization pretty well, nothing bad has happened so far. So what's the evidence that my habits outside of this organization, more or less, because let's say an addiction would be more of a personal issue, is a real problem, because they don't have that internal or personal evidence, and to the contrary, what they have is their own success and this positive feedback from their employees, from clients, from vendors, etc., that they're doing very well. It's almost this illusion that things must be well. In fact, what I'm doing, if you think about it, is part of the success. And that is...
That's an interesting twist.
Yeah, well, it is. And that also brings up something else, a little bit of a fear. What if I do stop what I'm doing? Would that not have a negative impact on my success?
So is it almost like a superstition or some kind of talisman that they're looking at?
Not necessarily superstition, but an irrational conclusion. An irrational thought, an irrational... It may not be a solid conclusion yet, but an irrational basis of, kind of making sense of their own life. And as you can imagine, we kind of like the status quo if it works. regardless of the components of that status quo.
Sure.
Right. So let's say if I'm running a successful business and drinking at times and, maybe passing out and this and that, blackouts, etc. But it's all kind of personal. I keep it hush hush. Nobody knows about it. And that's one component. Maybe I have a family, or I'm divorced, or I'm single, or whatever. That's another component. Where I live, in the geography, that's another component. The language I speak, the culture I come from. So all these are components, but they're all different components of one system. The system that is linked to that success, the tip of the iceberg that I'm looking at, right? Okay. So if everything kind of flows together, really subconsciously as well as to some extent consciously, we have this tendency to want to keep all these components together because it's working.
Sure.
Right? And that would be also linked to that fear. What if I remove one of these components? Because we don't know. We haven't tried that yet. Or we may have even tried it, like somebody who is addicted but is still running a successful business. They may compare this to 20 years ago where they didn't have a job, but they were not addicted. Maybe they were sober. And again, that's why the irrational concept comes to my mind, to separate and distinguish these two experiences, two periods of experiences. And it's almost like an immature and irrational level of thinking that, just because I was not addicted and I didn't have a job, doesn't mean that non-addiction leads to lack of success. Compared to what I'm experiencing today, I'm addicted and successful.
So it sounds like a ticking time bomb in a sense.
Oh yeah,
because once something collapses at work, if they let them go, if they suspend them, their world's really going to come apart. It's just going to blow up, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a ticking time bomb linked to external factors. Because the person that is hesitant to change these components. So the only thing that's going to change is due to external factors. Letting go of the job. Maybe they get a lawsuit for something that they have done or the company is doing. And then the company breaks apart. And then it would be easy to blame that external factor as well. Oh, everything is fine. Everything was fine until we got that lawsuit.
So my cocaine use has nothing to do with it.
My cocaine use has nothing to do with it.
So they can rationalize that right away.
Right.
Wow. That's complicated.
It is. And I'm glad you brought that up. It is complicated. And when you deal with addiction and when you're in the field of the treatment of addiction, you are dealing with these complicated minds and situations. So someone who is just knocking on your door, entering an addiction treatment center needs to be taken in that seriously complicated manner. That, you come from a very complex way of thinking about your life. And part of it has been successful and functional. Part of it has not been successful and functional. And our job is to help you discern what part has been functional and successful and part has not been, and help you to really move from irrational, unreasonable, illogical, maybe even sometimes superstitious thinking to a more rational, reasonable, logical, realistic, pragmatic, practical.
But can they do it? Or do they need help?
They need help.
Because they're not going to be able to do it on their own. They're not going to be able to see it, right?
If they were, they wouldn't be at your treatment center.
Yeah. That's right. Elite care, right?
Elite care, yeah. Speaking of which, for our viewers, please do check elitecaretreatmentcenter.com. That's elitecaretreatment.com. And that's one of our main sponsors. Phone number is 888-511-0607 if you need any help with addiction treatment.
Yeah, if anything we're talking about today sounds like somebody you know, or maybe even yourself, might be a place to call. I call these the great 7 human paradoxes. And one of them you just touched upon, which was change.
Yes.
Humans have this either aversion or attraction to it. And you mentioned it earlier, but I think it's funny because sometimes people don't I like the status quo, don't change it.
Yes.
But then people go, well, I'm bored.
Uh-huh.
I need to change. And they have this human paradox sometimes that works.
Yes.
So how do we know? Well, that's not going to. I don't know if that's going to work. But can you just be sometimes bored, and then all of a sudden you start trying out a certain thing like alcohol or drugs, and then you can become addicted?
Sometimes, that's always possible that I would say in some cases a person has reached a plateau, in their growth, in their experience, in their whatever it may be. So it could be a scholar, a scientist, a very intelligent person who has acquired a lot of knowledge and skills and degrees, and they have plateaued at some level. And then they must have had great self-esteem and sense of confidence that has gotten them through the ups and downs of learning and educating themselves and passing exams and getting degrees. So they may have plateaued at the level where they think, based on their self-esteem and almost narcissism, definitely narcissism, but in what level? Like dysfunctional, really extreme level of narcissism, kind of a clinical case, then they may, or a healthy level of narcissism. Either way, it's possible. But they may get to a point, sure, that they would say, well, almost this bloated sense of I can do anything, right?
Okay.
I have achieved so much in life. So now, let me try something I haven't achieved. Let me try something I haven't experimented with. Let me try something that would give me a little bit more from life than what I have already done. It's almost like experimentation, I would say. Somebody experimenting with themselves, with their own capacity, with their own level of tolerance, with their own level of, again, kind of settling down versus being excited about something, or even experimenting with life. Well, I've come to a point where I've experienced a lot in life, but I haven't experienced this yet. So I'm experimenting with life or with one's freedom. Maybe somebody thought that they were restricted during their whatever they have been doing, and now they're bored, meaning they want to experience some lack of restriction, more freedom. Could be.
That's another problem,
at
too.
times that it is possible, but it's not the majority of cases. Majority of cases and addicts that we see, usually, especially nowadays, when you look into the history of addicts, you see a lot more earlier starts, like people in their, basically almost like after elementary school, when they're 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old. By the time they're 11 or 12, they're experimenting with something. Maybe alcohol, maybe marijuana, maybe, again, porn, it may be something, because it is simply more easily accessible in the community. By the time they're 14 and 15, they have already experienced something, whatever that may be. It may be that extreme sexual experience, or a puff on a cigarette, or a glass of vodka, or whiskey, or whatever, or beer, or whatever it may be, or in some cases even coke and heroin and meth and so forth, right? So we see a lot more earlier start at earlier age. And if you want to know how it starts, mostly it is simply because either it is kind of it's fashionable, everybody is talking about it, so they create some kind of an excitement around it, or
do you
peer
need another
pressure.
element for that? In other words, everybody's doing it. Do you need another element? Is that what I mean by that? Is I have a little bit of low self-esteem. I want to be part of that in crowd. Does it have to be part of that?
There could be many things. Not just so low self-esteem. Again, it could be that experiential character of a person that they just want to try it. It could be because you want to belong to that group. We want to hang out with people who are fun.
But what would that bring to
boring.
them? What would that bring to them to hang out with a group that's fun? Not
Belonging,
boring?
sense of belonging.
Sense of belonging?
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It brings them sense of belonging. Maslow,
He's
Mr.
back.
Maslow,
All
he's
right.
back, yeah. So, and that's what you mostly see in 9% or 95% of cases. It's through this peer access, if you will, rather than, let's say, somebody just deciding one day, oh, okay, I have best friend, everybody's clean, everybody is great, family is working fantastic, but I personally am gonna decide to get out of there and smoke some cigarettes or do some coke or heroin or whatever. That's rarely the case. It could be, and that's something I would link to that other element. Like something is not working at home. There's isolation, like there is lack of communication and warmth and caring between parents and children or siblings and the person. There's sadness, there is anxiety, there is low self-esteem or confidence. There may be bullying going on at school, and there may be lack of emotional expression. A lot of families and households and environments, they may downplay the need to express yourself emotionally and even make it a taboo, like people shouldn't be talking about their feelings. A lot of times you get people who start acting in a deviant way, if you will. I'm using it carefully, but basically they're derailing from the norm. If the norm is you shouldn't talk about emotions, they're gonna say, okay, well, if I can't express and talk about it, somehow I have to feel these emotions. How am I going to feel it? Either numb it or feel it. Now, if you want to feel it, a lot of people who find themselves in these situations, they start cutting themselves.
That's a severe stage, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it starts with hurting yourself in one way or another. It could be with people who just kind of take a pen and kind of puncture a little bit, of a wound, let's say, because they get a sensation from that.
So their ability to feel has been suppressed to such a degree that they actually have to turn it into a physical manifestation.
Exactly. The ability not to necessarily feel, but to both feel and also express that feeling in verbal or even non-verbal but outwardly behavior. For instance, if a child decides to cry rather than talk, that would be a non-verbal mostly behavior, like they're behaving it out rather than talking about it. Or they could be talking about it, oh, like I'm sad, I don't know what it is about. But either of those behaviors would be unacceptable. If they are unacceptable to people who can take care of them or loved ones, and then it becomes taboo. Then the child learns, okay, well, I'm not supposed to feel it, or I'm not supposed to express it, even if I feel it. So then how am I going to deal with these experiences, these intense emotions? They
That's a tough balancing act too
into
for
that
parents.
physical expression of it, which is, okay, well, maybe, I can do something that nobody notices but me, right? And I can have some kind of a, let's say, an experience of being alive. Because you see, that's the other thing that feelings really give us, and that's why feelings are fantastic, great, they're natural. We shouldn't fight against the feelings or eliminate them. They give us a sense of being alive. Even sadness, even happiness, fear, loneliness, anything like that. And there are a series of different feelings, disappointment and betrayal, whether it is negative or positive, all of them, if we kind of look back in hindsight, let's say if you look back in your own childhood and remember at one time you were sad, yes, you were sad and it was tough, but you were alive. You were feeling. You remember that moment. It counted. It mattered. Somehow something made sense in hindsight because it mattered. But if you go back and just imagine like you weren't supposed to feel, you weren't supposed to have those feelings, or even you were forced into not having those or express those feelings, then in addition to having felt bad, you also would have this superimposing layer of well, my life didn't even matter. My existence at that time didn't even count, right? Because I wasn't even supposed to feel or to have any reaction to my environment. So it really cuts down to the very existential part of us, that if we are denied feeling, then what matters then?
This was pretty prevalent about 80, 100 years ago, wasn't it? If you think about it, a lot of the parents back then, said,
Right.
Forget about it, ignore it, don't feel it.
Yes.
You're a tough person.
Yeah.
But things have changed. I'm hoping.
Things have changed. So and one of those, and again, remember, we can have two reactions. One is, well, I'm gonna feel anyway, but not let anybody notice. So that may turn into a self-injurious behavior. It could be cutting. It could be, really any type of way of feeling a physical rush, if you will, especially because when we cut or hurt our skin or muscle or body, there's a lot of release of hormones and neurotransmitters. For instance, endorphins are released when you cut yourself, so it gives you that rush. That's something. Adrenaline, is released because you have to do something. Body has to heal, so they get that type of a rush, and it kind of washes over their numbness that they were supposed to feel. So that's one direction they can go. Or the other direction would be self-numbing. If I'm not supposed to feel and express my feelings, then the best way would be to kind of numb my consciousness around that feeling. What if I was knocked out? What if I didn't care? What if I wouldn't have to think about this problem? That would be better, because then it wouldn't matter whether I feel bad or not.
And can you do that with like a video game addiction? The kids will sit there for 10, 12 hours to stay out of reality?
Yeah. Well, you can do it with anything. You can do it with, again, gambling. You go to Las Vegas or wherever, and you kind of escape reality. You check out. You don't worry about responsibilities because you have that rush of winning that poker game, perhaps doubling your money. So that's kind of on the on the horizon. So you're looking forward to that, and it could be anything. It could be a sexual act that you're looking forward to and allows you to escape. It can be that injection or snort or puff or whatever substance that you want to use. It could be anything that allows you to escape. So yeah, it could be any of those.
It's interesting. Let me see how I would phrase this. I like this conversation about self-deception. I guess it's kind of what we're talking about. We're self-deceiving ourselves, whether we're rationalizing or denying or bargaining, however we may look at it. And tip number one is really, once again, to get help.
Yeah.
Tip number one, when we're stuck, a lot of times the person can't tell if they're going through the denial or the bargaining or rationalizing, whatever they're doing. So it's really up to other ones, significant others or loved ones, to be able to say you need help.
So don't just rely on your own knowledge and logic and reasoning. So get it checked. Check with someone whether or not there's something you need to look at. That's tip number one.
Tip number one. There you go. I know recently in the news, I think actually today, Hayden Pattenier, I think is how you say her name. Okay. She was made famous in the show Heroes, if I'm correct.
Oh, really?
Blonde, really lovely lady, but I think she just committed herself today.
Oh, wow.
To treatment.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Which is nice, because she was able to, either by, I don't know exactly the story, so I don't know if somebody encouraged her or she did it by herself. But what kind of pressure does that put on? We were talking about teenagers earlier, 11, 12, 14, 15. And what kind of pressure does that put on teenagers when they know a movie star is doing drugs? And I want to look at the other side too. And the other side is, if Hayden commits herself to a treatment center, would that encourage girls and boys out there who are in their teenagers, or who are teenagers who are addicted? Would that be the tipping point for them?
Right.
What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think that, developmentally, if you think about it, if teenagers are facing that culture of success orientation, that anyone in young age can become super famous and successful. All you need are really kind of good looks or some talents or some skills. There is so much glamorization around this idea of having made it in life early, that someone like a role model, even a negative one, who, such as another teenager being in a movie and famous and they have gotten involved in drugs, would not deter the average teenager from doing the same exact thing, because there is that sense of like over bloated self-esteem and in confidence that, I'm different. I can make it. That person didn't make it. Because there's this drive for success, for having it all.
You're talking about the teenager who's not the star.
Right.
So they're watching the TV.
They're watching the TV. They're fantasizing about what it would be like to be that successful. And if drugs are involved, then the sense of overconfidence would fool oneself into believing that, no, I can be successful, but I'm not going to be like them. I'm not going to get involved in drugs. Or even if I get involved in drugs, then I can beat it. I can stop whenever I want. There's always that sense of, false hope every human being has. Because how can we differentiate between true hope and false hope? It's not really possible. Hope is hope. It's just hope.
Exactly.
Right? We hope it will happen. Something will happen. Now, you can certainly get better at distinguishing what part of your hopefulness is more realistic than the other part, but you need experience to back that up. So, which teenagers don't have. Somebody in their 40s, 50s, having gone through multiple developmental stages, looking back, they can kind of dissect and analyze and say, oh yeah, I remember when I was 18-year-old, I was hopeful I could do this, but that was a different feeling than when I was 25-year-old and I was hopeful that I could do something else. I can distinguish those types of hopefulness, moments of hopefulness. And I can see that the first one wasn't as solid and grounded and mature and calculated, but the second one was. And why was it so? Oh, now I know, because I had this part of the information or that piece of information or that piece of information. So then we can do this kind of introspection and learn more about our own ability in hoping for the better and be more realistic in hoping. For instance, I can hope, if I look back in my developmental stages and years that I have done multiple different things, I can hope to retire by 55 rather than 65. That's more realistic. But I know if I hoped to be a billionaire within the next 5 years, it's just not realistic. As simple as that. So I'm going to give up that hope. Why would I want to hope into something that has less likelihood? I'm going to hope into something that has more likelihood.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
So do you think people today, we can go teenagers, young adults, do you think sometimes their standards of being, how would you say, I'm trying to think what would be the good name here for it. not a super person, but a ideal person.
Okay.
Do they think the standards have gone up? As you mentioned, they want to be like these people.
Right.
They want to be like the movie star. They want the attention. They want the power. Has it gone up higher now, do you think, than maybe 30, 40 years ago?
I don't think that the standards have gone up, but I believe that the one difference here is that expectation to make it sooner has gone up or has increased. Like nowadays, because there are more examples of younger people being successful, for instance, we know somewhere I read that about 35 or 40% of I believe the billionaires are less than 40-year-old. Right? So a big minority.
I'm not one of them. Yeah.
And you and I, we are not one of them.
Yes.
But the big minority are young people who are billionaires, or even the millionaires too, if you think about it.
Mark Zuckerberg, yes.
The younger generation. So how come that the younger people have been able to achieve that level of success at this accelerated fashion? And I think that's what we observe, this expectation as well as opportunity, where age doesn't necessarily matter as much as skills and knowledge and talents matter. Now, some people have all three. Some people have two. Some people are at the right time, right place, so they make it. But going back to, I think, the teenagers and younger generation who grow up nowadays, the standards haven't gone up, but they look at each other and say, wow, more and more younger people are becoming successful, so what's wrong with me? Or why shouldn't I be successful as well? So that expectation of being successful at a younger age nowadays is kind of setting in, whereas perhaps maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we didn't have that expectation. Maybe people had the reverse expectation. Well, I'll be successful once I'm in my 50s, 60s, kind of older age. I need a lot of experience. I need inheritance. I need this, I need that. But nowadays, none of that matters. A 12-year-old may suddenly become a billionaire because they invented something, and they may have had that expectation that, what's wrong with me becoming a billionaire? My parents can take care of me until I'm 18 and be the, the custodians more or less. And then I can make all my decisions.
That's interesting, because I know 30 years ago, teenagers, at least where I grew up, and it seemed like society in general, 30 years ago, they were kind of like, remember the book from Ellison? I think it was Ralph Ellison, The Invisible Man? Talking about African Americans, where they were just born, they were invisible to society. Teenagers were kind of invisible to society 30 years ago. You didn't have, the fashions were not being touted on TV. You didn't see the advertising for them. You didn't see any kind of music videos or anything. I mean, they were really non-existent.
They were non-existent.
You went with your parents to go to dinner with somebody, you kind of sat in the corner. And
I think that is also how we can tie this back into the addiction philosophy and discussion, the fact that there is certainly a lot more pressure from popular media, social media, popular media, the general media out there, that because of this association that they always make between youth, longevity, health, and then materialism, and also a lot of substances, for instance, cigarettes, right, and drinks, alcohol. You see, wasn't it recently like there was the famous vodka producer? I forget the name of the
Kettle?
No, the other one. I
Goose?
forget it. No.
Not that one either.
Another one.
You can tell we don't drink very much.
Yeah, we don't drink much, but it came up with the shape of a woman in terms of they changed the bottle, right, into a shape of a woman, and they were advertising that. So, connecting sexuality with drinking even more. And then
that's like the days when they used to show the cowboys in the movies and the action heroes smoking. Yeah, it's a big boo-boo.
You still have that, right? Don't they have
I
ads?
think they've banned it mostly from the movies now.
Movies, but how about print ads?
That's a good
and
question.
They're like smoking associated with, again, some kind of a success or pleasure. So it's kind of a contradictory. Smoking kills you, but they associate it with the opposite of that, with youth and success and pleasure and health.
So let's elaborate on that point. So you're watching movies like Swingers, like years ago, very funny movie, 4 guys. There was a lot of drinking involved.
Yeah.
Other movies that are really popular include either drug use or alcohol. Does that has the same play, doesn't it? People say, "I want to be like that. I want to be fun."
Yeah.
Not necessarily, "I want to be a better person." I just want that's okay to do because they're doing it.
And also fun. The word fun and the experience of fun is mostly associated with drinking and smoking and, sexual activity. Basically, it's like as if fun cannot exist without these. Like a person who, for instance, watching a comedy is not fun. Yes, I understand that disinhibition is what people are looking for, right? And again, kind of that numbness or the rush or the high, they get an extreme sense of, pleasure, I would say. Why do people do, for instance, stimulants, coke, cocaine, and meth and things like that? Because they get that rush of invincibility, right? They can do anything. They're excited about things. They can take over the world, type of a deal. Things become easier. So that it's an extreme level of, I believe, is being alive. Which teenagers a lot of times they have that naturally. People who don't smoke or drink and this and that and are healthy, get up early in the morning. They want to conquer the world. They have so much energy. Right? We used to have that. You don't remember?
I don't have that anymore.
No.
My 5-year-old has it.
Okay, 5-year-old, exactly. Kids have that, right? There's
Very much
vibrant energy that is natural. Well, everybody wants to keep having that for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. Right? We remember that we were filled with so much energy and we could do anything, right, that we wanted to or we wished or fantasized, which was a fantasy. We couldn't do anything, but we thought we could. And that moment of experiencing that rush, we want to re-experience it again and again until the day we die.
And that's where addiction traps you. Because it starts off for fun, but then all of a sudden you're actually feeling trapped.
Then they can't get out. You can't get it under control. Your body has changed. Your tolerance has changed. Your reactions to the substances have changed. And beyond a personal experience, you also leave a trail of damages with interpersonal experience, with family members, friends, even business experiences, business endeavors. You have damaged a lot, and ultimately it catches up with you not only physiologically, but also mentally and spiritually, existentially, to a point where you end up questioning, what the hell am I doing? Life is no more fun. I have everything I want, but it doesn't matter. Suddenly there's a lack of meaningfulness, purpose, and a sense of, I would say, identity again, like a self-identity, that me or I as a human being, I'm alive and I'm purposeful and I matter and worth, that this life is worth it. We lose that.
So should a person step back and look to see if they're doing something over and over again?
Yeah.
Sleeping around a lot.
Yeah.
Or, just because they're kind of addicted to the feeling or the sexual feeling. So they step back and look at it and say, is this normal? I'm trying to get to tip number 2. Okay. Is this something that should look back and go, this isn't normal, it's not fun anymore?
I would say, rather than asking this is normal or not, if, again, back to our viewers, if you as a viewer, you're struggling with this or you know someone who is struggling, the better question would be, I know this is not working for me. Why am I continuing doing the same thing that's not working for me over and over again? Why am I continuing that? Enough is enough. I'm intelligent enough to even recognize that something is not working in my life. So let me bet on that. Let me bet on my intelligence, at least whatever is left of it. You may argue that there's not much intelligence left, but I do believe that there is some kind of a self-reflection and awareness left for a person who realizes, this is not working for me. I'm really not happy in life, even though I have everything I think I should have to be happy, but I'm not happy. So why not face the reality and acknowledge that, very little smidgen of intelligence that is left, in recognizing that my life is in this array and I deserve better. So why don't I just take a look at that and reach for help and ask for some tools, techniques, mechanisms, strategies, knowledge, epiphanies, whatever, insights, whatever we want to call it, to help me get out of this rut, get out of this mess, and turn my life around while I still have time to do so.
So tip 1, get help, get outside help, and then tip 2, see if it's working.
See if it is working.
See if it's working.
And if it is not working, acknowledge it, that it is not working. Be honest to yourself. Be honest to yourself that it is not working, and also acknowledge, I would say, and that's the other part, affirm and acknowledge that you still have something in you worth living, and bank on that, invest on that. That's tip number 2.
Tip number 2, now we're going to switch a little bit of gears. I want to look at labeling.
Okay.
Does it matter if we label somebody as an addict? What do you say, Dr. G?
Yeah, we should never really label people. We should just help people. Labeling, the reason some people do is because of a lack of any other better strategy in their lives. Almost like it goes back to lack of communication skills. People who could have come across and said, listen, I notice you're struggling with something in life. You're not your old self. There is something going on. I'm your friend. I'm noticing it. How can I help? Just talk to me. And, maybe if it's 5 minutes, maybe it is 2 minutes. I'm here for you. Instead of that, what do? We go around and say, you know what? You're an addict. Or you're no good. You're low life. Or you're a, cheater, liar, this and that.
Remind me of Donald Trump. Yeah, he goes around calling people who disagree with him, you're a loser, and he labels the person. But for a second here, what is the mentality of the addict? For instance, let's say I'm the addict.
Yeah.
And our cameraman, you can't see back there, calls me an addict.
Yes.
What is going through my head at that point? Does it reinforce my problem in my head? Does it say, Carlos, you are an addict? People calling you an addict. Mm-hmm. I can't ever get out of this.
It's for some people.
For some people.
For some people, it does, but not for all. It's not a
Would it
golden
motivate
rule.
others?
For others who I would say have a more, kind of a stronger self-confidence and self-esteem, they wouldn't immediately buy into that. They wouldn't immediately crumble in front of that criticism. They may say, well, that's your opinion, and maybe I'm doing certain things that come across as unpleasant, but I believe that has to do with XYZ rather than really, oh yeah, I'm an addict and I can never get over this. So it really depends on the person. But certainly labeling is never good. Whether it is something that a person disagrees with it or not, or agrees with it, as like you mentioned in the first example, labeling is not functional. It's not effective. It's not an effective means of communication. Yeah, like you're saying, Trump or whoever telling another person, you are a loser. Well, how helpful was that? Besides just winning. You see, that's the thing. A lot of people use labeling, especially in these political scenes or maybe debates and arguments about winning or losing, because it is about winning and losing. If I can put you down where you're not getting back up, I have won. Whatever means, I have done that. Whether I told you you're a loser and you're not getting back up, or maybe I brought an evidence and say, hey, look what I found that is going to, piss you off, and now you're not getting back up. Or maybe I prove that 5,000 people endorsed me and only 2 people endorsed you, and again, you're not getting back up. It's all about that. Who is getting back up, on their feet to fight again? So whatever I'm using to put the other person down and keep him down ensures that I'm winning. So it goes back to that, using that label of you're a loser, right? However, in going back to addiction, if you're calling a person an addict, it's not about winning and losing. It's mostly about lack of communication skills for a person who has been hurt in their relationship with an addict, that they are at the end of their ropes a lot of times. They don't know what else to say. They have expressed themselves many times that I'm here for you, talk to me, I'm here to help, or do this or don't do that. But then in the end, they're, like I said, at the end of their ropes. They have no more tools left in their tool set. So they're going to say, you know what, you're just an addict. You're hopeless. I cannot do anything with you. You're not getting me. You're not understanding me. You're not noticing how much pain I have gone through because of you. So it's very likely people use labels.
Let me ask you this question. This might be, we have a few minutes left, so it might be too controversial to even cover in enough time, but maybe I'm just getting it wrong too. 12 steps.
Yes.
I've known a lot of people who've gone through it. I went through Al-Anon. A lot of them say you're an alcoholic and you will always be an alcoholic. Does that hold somebody back if they leave that label on themselves? I'm an alcoholic.
Right.
You think that's a good thing, or is it maybe I'm just misreading it?
I believe that there are. It depends on the person. I truly believe it depends on the person. I have worked with people struggling with alcoholism who cannot fathom a healthy life without identifying themselves as a lifetime alcoholic. It helps them. It helps them to center themselves, ground themselves, keep focused and dedicated to their lifelong treatment of, I'm going to take life one day at a time. This is helping me. Don't give me something that doesn't help me. So I would say, yeah, for that person it works. But doesn't mean it will work for everybody. I have worked also with a lot of people who have struggled with alcoholism, who honestly, unlike the popular belief that you have to be an alcoholic for the rest of your life, they have been able to go through all the 12 steps and have come out victoriously in the end, where they don't necessarily regard themselves as an alcoholic anymore. Yeah. They still take life one day at a time. They still do the 12 steps. They still go to the meetings, but they just have chosen to personally shed that label. They don't call themselves an alcoholic. They say, you know what? I have been alcoholic. I have been addicted. I have been, down, but I learned my way how to remain sober. I no longer want to, need to, or have an urge to drink. It's out of my life, but also I choose not to call myself as an alcoholic for life. So they have taken that personal, kind of, I would say, it's hard to, identity. I think it's an identity that they have espoused for themselves, where they're putting that chapter of addiction behind them. They're no longer identifying with, oh yeah, I'm an addict. No, they say, no, I'm not an addict anymore. It was in my past.
They should, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So it sounds like they should refer to tip 2.
Uh-huh.
In other words, if they take the label off, go back to tip 2, is it working if I take the label off?
Yes, very good. Is it working? And
he's rubbing off on me. I like it. All right.
And again, we have had many people who proved to themselves that it is not working, because they took the label off and it stopped working because they stopped doing the work. It's not the label, it is what you do after you take the label off. Are you going to stop doing the work and you go back to your old habits and ignore everything, going back into denial, back into thinking you can conquer the world? Or are you taking life one day at a time, doing the right things in your life? If you are, it doesn't matter what label. You can call yourself Martian. Who cares? Call yourself guru, a spiritual, God-sent messenger. Who cares? Well, you are doing what you need to do to stay sober. That's all that cares.
Excellent stuff.
That they care.
Excellent stuff. 3 tips we have. Get help.
Yes.
See if it's working.
Uh-huh.
And the third one, don't label.
Don't label.
Don't label people, right?
Don't label people.
Those 3.
Yes. Unless you're labeling them.
To help them?
No. And labeling them in a good,
Not everything's rubbing off.
light. Unless
yes.
Remember that study was done with school children?
Oh, the Pygmalion study. Yes.
So if you label anyone in a good light, ultimately it will work for them. Now, however, in that case too, you have to be careful. You don't want to kind of blow up their ego and narcissism, like falsely and inaccurately paint them as all-knowing and fantastic and angels and this and that, and kind of give them this false sense of I'm above human beings. I'm above everybody else. You don't want to do that. But if you tell someone, you're smart, you should figure it out. You can figure it out. I believe in you. You have survived so far. The people who are struggling with alcoholism or drug addiction and whatnot, and they're still alive, how did they survive so far? There's something good about them.
Exactly.
That's a good labeling. Okay? You tell somebody, listen, you have been able to be sober at times. How did that work? Let's talk about those times. How were you able to stay away from drugs for 2 days? Let's talk about that. That's strength. That's good labeling. That means you have something smart about you. Let's work on that.
I like it.
Okay.
I like it.
Let's work on that.
I hope you enjoyed it. Let's work on that. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. We truly want you to get help. We truly want you to enjoy the life you deserve to enjoy. Dr. G, where else can we go for more help if we need it?
If you need more help, please visit our sponsor, EliteCareTreatment.com. They're available and willing to help you answer any questions that you may have. You can also contact them at 888-511-0607. Have a wonderful day.